Response, recent disaster, governor's response, hurricane. It's not true. Everything he says is a lie. Now, on the contrary, there has been Donald Trump who has refused aid to states before. There are reported conversations with Kushner.
In this one, we're introducing a new person to the channel named John Doyle, and he is about to engage woke moron Destiny in a heated debate related to Trump economy versus Kamala's economy, and how the folks affected by Hurricane Helene are forced to suffer much like the victims in Maui are under Kamala and Biden's leadership due to their misappropriations of government funding and their America Last agenda. Now let's get into it.
Donald Trump was removing 22 regulations for every one his administration was writing. The Republican Congress passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which put more money into businesses and into the pockets of consumers and the American people, which of course allowed for more economic growth. And we had Donald Trump as our president. He was the cheerleader for the economy and industry, and small business confidence was reaching historic highs, the highest they'd been since 1938, all under Donald Trump. At the end of the Obama administration, non-residential equipment and structure investments were at near all-time lows. Following the passage of the Taxes and Jobs Cut Act, they were soaring to near all-time highs. Under the leadership of Donald Trump, the economy was secure. Compare this with the Biden administration. You've got 20% inflation. Consumer confidence is in the toilet. Since the end of the pandemic, prime-age working labor participation remains at historic lows, while a majority of jobs that have been created on net have all gone to immigrants. The job growth that Biden says he takes credit for, all of the jobs that we've made in the recovery from COVID, on net, all of those are going to immigrants. None of those are going to Americans on net since 2019. And if you look at a survey from Red Balloon and Public Square from 80,000 small businesses, they find that 40% of business owners have recently been forced to delay payments, 70% are putting staffing and expansion plans on hold, 64% believe that we're headed towards stagflation, and half say that definitely or probably they will not survive another 4-year term under the Biden-Harris presidency. The Biden-Harris economy clearly is not working for the American taxpayer or for the American business owner. And of course, nothing matters if the economic growth that we have witnessed, to the extent that it even exists, does not go to the actual American people and does not actually work for them. As we'll discuss tonight, our economy under Kamala and Biden is one that works to fly illegal migrants into our country and one that works to spend money and sell weapons to other countries while American towns and American people are drowning under 10 feet of water. Joe Biden, yesterday, he said there's no more money for North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, all these people who desperately need support right now. But in the last 2 years, we have given $175 billion to Ukraine. Why? Literally why? The border wall, the most pro-American idea in the last 10 years, securing America's border. Civilization 101, that was supposed to cost like what, $10 billion, but that was too expensive. Trump's mass deportation plan is supposed to cost $100 billion. I have to read about why that's impossible every day in the New Yorker, but we're sending $175 billion to Ukraine just in the last 2.5 years, which by the way is far more difficult mechanically, like laundering money to foreign countries, going through different organizations, keeping track of it. The point being, I pay taxes, you pay taxes. Wouldn't it be nice for a change to see that money actually going towards the interests of American people instead of to the citizens of the world? Wouldn't it be nice for the American government to actually look out for you and not everyone else in the world while you foot the bill? I won't hold my breath, however, expecting answers to these questions because they aren't supposed to be answered. They have no plan. They don't have a plan because they are completely beholden to the political establishment. That's why things can more or less continue operating and the public doesn't understand how badly their president's mental state is until the first time they wheel him out for a debate and people realize how gone this guy is, because the White House can more or less continue to run because Joe Biden is not actually in charge. And there's no plan but to continue the managed decline of our country. She even had no policies on her website until literally 5 minutes ago. And if she does have a plan to fix everything, you have to ask, okay, why? What's going wrong right now? You're in office. You've been in office for 4 years. Joe Biden clearly hasn't been in charge. So who has been in charge? Why don't you fix these things now? And I mean, he even Trump owned up to his record in 2020 by saying that he will continue to do more of what has been successful. If Kamala is saying, well, there are problems, how is that then not an indictment of her, everything that's happened in the last 4 years? And look at what's happening today. We've got hurricanes destroying towns, destroying livelihoods, $30 billion in property damage, 160 people dead. What does Joe Biden say when asked if he has any words for the victims of the hurricane? He says, well, we've given them everything we have. They say, can we give any more resources? He says, no. Okay, so the commander-in-chief is missing. What about Kamala? She has this opportunity as his second in command to display and coordinate a field response, display leadership, use the power of the federal government in ways that she only and uniquely has access to, quelling any doubts that we may have about her leadership capabilities, but she didn't. What she did instead is basically just take staged photographs on a plane instead of going to actually visit the people impacted by the hurricane, which is what Trump is doing. Trump is down there on the ground right now, distributing resources, telling people that the American people have not been forgotten about, taking care of these things. Just like in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, the deadliest in American history, Donald Trump was on the ground, putting his guys to work, taking care of American people 15 years before he would even become president. And he's on the ground doing the same thing today. Kamala Harris is simply incapable of leading. She's not intelligent, she's not competent, she's not brave, she doesn't have the charisma. She's just the current face of the establishment. Everything that they do, it's all talk. That's what Trump talked about. All talk, no action. She is just the incumbent role of that. She has no agency herself. She will simply continue what has been going on for the last 60 years in this country. And they will never forgive Donald Trump for convincing the American people that it didn't have to be that way, that it doesn't have to just be this managed decline where everything is more expensive yet less in quality, and you're now working and you can't afford to go to school and let alone graduate and find a job, and because they're all on net going to immigrants. They will never forgive Trump for challenging these political orthodoxies, let alone successfully. And so it's really not so much a question about Trump versus Kamala. It seems to be much more Trump versus whatever has been happening in our country for the last 60 years. And Trump is the only successful candidate of any of these political orthodoxies to be able to break free from them. And Kamala is just the incumbent candidate with the blessing and backing of the entire political establishment. So if you want things to continue how they've been going for the last 4 years, and broadly speaking the last 60 years, then you can support Kamala. But if you actually want to create opportunities that will meaningfully change our country and make it great again, then the obvious choice is Donald J. Trump for president. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that opening, John. We're going to kick it over to Stephen for 10 minutes as well. And just want to let everybody know that if Stephen would like, he can push some of his opening statement time into the open dialogue if he doesn't want to take the full 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Stephen, for being with us. The floor is all yours for your opening as well.
You guys hear me? I'm audible?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Let me throw my timer on screen. Okay, I'm good. Ready? Yeah? Yes, perfect. I think I heard a yes there.
Yes.
Okay. We have two parties in the United States, and right now, one of those parties lives in delusion. Conservatives rely on the ability to cast a huge net and to cover a ton of ground and to lie and lie and lie about every single topic they bring up. That's why if you try to ever actually force a conservative to own a particular position, they will pivot away from that and go to some other position where they will lie. Okay, most of the people that, for instance, I'm debating on these types of debates now don't believe, for instance, that dinosaurs existed. If you look at things like, I believe, the response to the recent disasters was brought up in North Carolina. If you look at the responses from DeSantis, if you look at the responses from Kemp in Georgia, if you look at the response from Collins, everybody is saying we are getting exactly what we need. Joe Biden has called these people already. It is a lie that Donald Trump is pushing. It is a lie that conservatives like John Doyle are pushing, that states aren't getting what they need from Biden. This is just not true. Google.com, search for it. Governor's response, recent disaster, governor's response, hurricane. It's not true. Everything he says is a lie. Now, on the contrary, there has been Donald Trump who has refused aid to states before. There are reported conversations with Kushner saying that Donald Trump wanted to withhold aid from people. Initially in California, when the wildfires were happening under his term, Donald Trump withheld that aid. In a speech a few days ago, Donald Trump talked again about potentially withholding aid from California if they didn't sign on to a bill that would open up more land in the north for agricultural purposes. There is only one president that I know of in recent history that has threatened to withhold national federal aid from states in times of disaster, and that is Donald Trump. Joe Biden has never done this. You will not find statements of him ever doing this. You can look at, I believe, Roy Collins on Twitter right now, just yesterday tweeted a thanks to Biden for calling him and providing everything that they need. This is a lie, like basically every other thing that is said in support of the Republicans. And even ignoring all of the policy, we can even say, fine, maybe they might have a better stance on the border. They don't. Maybe they might have a better stance on the economy. They don't. Maybe they might have a better stance on foreign policy. They definitely don't. Fine, maybe they do, but even if they did, Donald Trump wouldn't be the guy that would be able to get anything done.
Did anybody buy one word that Destiny just said right there? He literally started off, it's completely amazing that he just started this segment with arguments that are straight up lies. He claims conservatives cast a wide net to cover more ground, when the reality is conservative principles are pretty simple. Less spending, restrictions on abortions, free speech, uninfringed to a rights, strong law enforcement. It's I mean, you add what I missed. What is he talking about? That's completely straight up lies. And, right there at the end, he even said, this is a lie. And I think he's talking about himself. But then he goes on and says that they have bad border policies, bad this, bad that. But then he goes, but maybe they do. Or, well, maybe they do. It's like, what do you mean? You're not making any sense. You just said they were bad, but then you said, well, maybe they're good. It's crazy. And then secondly there, Trump threatening to withhold aid isn't the act of withholding aid, okay? It's just a threat. And if I remember correctly, he was only threatened to withhold aid to sanctuary cities who were in direct violation of federal laws as it pertained to illegal immigration. They weren't deporting illegal immigrants. They weren't prosecuting illegal immigrants after committing, crime within our country, and basically protecting them. So why would it be on a person from Kansas who pays their federal taxes to provide aid to another state or another city in another state that isn't following the written laws of the land as it pertains to anything? And to his point about DeSantis, Ron has Florida running like a finely tuned engine that has the ability not only to support itself in this natural disaster, also has the resources available to assist other states. It's not like how Destiny presented it when he says, Google it. All these governors are saying they're fine. Yeah, but that has nothing to do with national disaster relief funds. It has to do with them spending appropriately in the first place, putting money aside, setting money aside so that when the natural disasters come, because it's inevitable in Florida and these states down here, that it's going to happen. So when it does, the funding is available, which apparently preparing for inevitable natural disasters is something the federal government is completely incapable of, because as we know, they're basically, Biden even said, running out of funds to help these Americans from this natural disaster, this Hurricane Helene, much similar to how he's treating the American citizens in Maui. Meanwhile, sending hundreds of millions of dollars in foreign aid over to other countries and letting Social Security fizzle out. So
Donald Trump is easily one of the worst presidents of all time, and his character should reflect on the people that defend him as well. Because remember, the only way to defend Donald Trump is to ignore reality, to be delusional, to pretend that everything under his administration didn't happen, to pretend that things under Biden have happened that haven't happened, and to pretend that somehow in the future he's going to be able to do all of these things that he had a monumental failure of attempting during his 4 years. And remember, it's going to be with an entirely new administration, because nobody that works with Trump ever wants to work with him again, because either they see that Trump is corrupt or he calls them a rhino. And so now we have a new Trump. We've got a new vice president with Trump, a guy that said he would co-sign onto all of the malicious activity that Trump wants to do, which Pence wasn't willing to go along with. God knows who he'd want to staff the Department of Justice with, or what any of his other cabinet positions would be like. And God help us all. Even if Trump loses the election, honestly, even if he loses the election by a landslide, the fact that there are so many tens of millions of Americans that have been lied to and tricked and deceived by the figures that were supposed to be at the left. Remember when we were supposed to have a George Soros controlling all of our communications, and instead we got an Elon Musk who is full-throatedly, avowedly, pro-Trump and posting AI misinformation about Kamala Harris, on a social media platform. Remember when the Hunter Biden laptop suppression was like the worst thing that's ever happened in the world? And then we get a JD Vance leak, and all of a sudden, now Republicans believe in foreign interference. Now people leaking stuff about actual politicians. Believe it or not, Hunter Biden never ran for anything. I don't know if people remember that or not. Now it's a huge problem. Censoring stories was supposed to be the worst thing. We care about doxing. We care about all these things now. It's crazy how Republicans discover morality and standards whenever they have to levy any type of criticism to the left. I just wish that at some point they would live up to a single standard or apply anything consistently across the board.
Thank you very much for that 10-minute opening statement as well, Stephen. We are going to switch it back to John for his 5-minute rebuttal. John, thanks very much. The floor is all yours.
It seemed to me like there was a lot there that was generally just firing from the hip at Republicans and specifically Donald Trump. And I think what it gets down to, which is what this debate often does, is just competing views of how politics actually works in this country. Destiny seems to be somebody who has faith in the establishment and the system, generally speaking, to do its job. And Donald Trump's political project is exactly the opposite of that. Donald Trump's political project was to go in and drain the swamp. And as anybody who's a Trump supporter knows, and maybe even laments, that did not exactly happen in his first administration. And it's because Donald Trump was the first president under the Republican ticket who was not awarded a mechanically functioning administration. Donald Trump, even George Bush, who I don't think anyone here maybe is a fan of the way that his administration functioned, but that administration functioned as it should have in the sense that George Bush was able to delegate and get things done. Donald Trump was not able to do this because there were so many people who understood that he was simply an irritant to an otherwise functioning, well-oiled machine, which is the Washington establishment. They didn't necessarily want to hitch their cart to that and taint a resume. Or you had Reince Priebus, the former head of the RNC. You know, he had a Rolodex of names ready to go to fill these staffing positions. So it's not at all surprising to me that Trump was not able to execute the way that other presidents, including Republican presidents, were able to execute, because everything that Trump sought to do was a disruption of orthodoxies which have existed for 60 years and would like to exist after Donald Trump. And I think that a lot of those personnel issues have been resolved since. I think he understands some of the problems there. But I also think it's sort of nonsensical to conflate, sort of Republican delusion with Democrat delusion. Because when you have Republican delusion, that's like your aunt or uncle at dinner who says something like, I don't know, what if elites are like satanic and do crazy rituals? And it's like, yeah, that's crazy. Democrat delusion is like what these people run on. They run on the issue of, hey, what if we put an axe wound in between a child's legs? Wouldn't that be neat? Hey, what if we couldn't actually define like what a woman is? Things like that. Again, very low-hanging fruit, but simultaneously, I think very important to understand exactly which party is the one advertising and establishing power based on delusion. And so I didn't really hear much that was addressing the points I laid out directly in terms of why Trump did X. It was successful. Biden undid X, and now we are experiencing bad results because of that. And so in terms of Trump's staffing issues, again, you have an incentive there to not want to hitch your cart to that, whereas Kamala Harris had the highest overturning rate for her White House staff in history. It was like 92%. 92% of people who were working for her went away. They said, no, thank you, no more. What kind of leader is it where people who are the closest to her, working for her, in proximity to her, with no other incentive, no other obvious lily pad? I mean, you're working for Kamala Harris. That's maybe the future president. That's the vice president. They still left those jobs because working for her was such a nightmare. So the idea that she could somehow command and be a better executive than Donald Trump is just complete nonsense. Moreover, we haven't even heard that case. All we've heard is that Donald Trump is bad because Republicans are delusional or things like that. The tariff policy, I don't understand why we're against tariffs. Tariffs are like as American as apple pie. Every man who's on Mount Rushmore was a protectionist. 95% of all imports during the height of America's economic growth in the 19th and 20th century were tariffed. Biden even kept the tariffs that Trump implemented, so if they were so bad with the Chinese imports, I mean, you would think that he would have repealed those, but of course he didn't. He held on to them. So I think that, the president is the executive. He doesn't have to necessarily pass bipartisan legislation to be an effective president. He is the executive, the chief executive. Sam Francis once said that there are...
In conclusion, Trump really isn't a politician. He's a New York businessman who was kind of thrust into this position by Democrat pundits of old who have now turned their back on him because he simply ran on the Republican ticket. But, Trump has a great sense of humor. And it cracks me up that so many of these woke pundits like Destiny, Sink Uger, David Pacman, The View, all think every joke Trump says is Trump being serious. And it exposes their lack of sense of humor, straight up delusional perspective, or the fact that they're being paid to program their audience. Regardless, they're anti-American, following the pattern to accuse their enemies of doing exactly what they are doing themselves. So if you agree with that, you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.